Greetings, W6BDD, George in Olathe, Kansas here with a new video. I'm going to go through and show you what I'm doing. I picked up a HyGain Thunderbird TH6DXX tri-beam antenna, and I'm going to resurrect it, so to speak. So I'm going to show you what it looks like, what it's going to look like after it's done, and the steps I do to take it. So first thing is this is what the old one looks like. So as you can see, there's these old U-shaped clamps on here, all rusted, and it's so rusted that no amount of penetrating fluid, anything that I use works. I've tried a torch, I've tried all sorts of things. I finally relied on my old trusty bolt cutters. So get the bolt cutters between the clamp on the screw and snip them. As you can see, it takes them off real well. So these are going to get replaced with stainless steel. I'll show you. These are the traps. So two of the elements, the radiators as they call them, have two sets of traps on each one. So there's a 10 and 15, and then the 20s are on some of the other elements. You can see up here is the tip that goes up through my tree trunk there. So that's what they look like before. This is what it looks like after. So I will take you through the steps to do this, but I got white vinyl caps. It had the plastic black caps on it. I went with white vinyl because it's a little softer material. It's not as hard as when you try to put it on. And being white, it's more UV reflective. So a lot of antenna makers put black and red on. I chose white. I tried to find UV proof caps, and talking to several manufacturers, they said honestly the cap is going to degrade material wise and rot before the UV ever does anything. So I got vinyl, punched a hole in it as you can see here, put some silicone grease around the shaft, slid it up so it would capture the grease, and that's the caps here. And I used a 3/4 inch copper pipe and drove it down through the center. There's spacers you'll see. So this fits nicely. It's slightly smaller in diameter than the tubing for the trap, so it slides down in there. Centers up on the cap. Take a hammer, tap it on a piece of 2x4, and it perforates it, and then voila, you got a nice little cap to slide on your trap there. You can see I've got the stainless steel clamps. I bought these at Grainger. Do not buy the Chinese kind on Amazon. They don't work. They fail. So these are average about $1 a piece at Grainger. I looked at the hardware store. Hardware store wants $3 to $4 a piece for these. So get a box of 10 for $1 a piece, and you're way money ahead here. Okay, there's also this gray goopy grease on there. It looks like it's not. It's called Noalox. No aluminum oxide. Noalox. It's made by a company called Ideal. That's Noalox. Silicone grease. Do not use regular grease on an antenna. Silicone grease. Okay? I'll show you why. Alright, we'll take a walk over here. My traps are mostly finished. I need to start doing the straight ones, but so you can see here's the white caps on the small tips. There's my white caps on the traps. These traps are all nice and done. Stainless steel clamps with Noalox. So what is Noalox? Noalox is a compound. You've heard of anti-seize. Well, it's kind of like anti-seize, but it's for preventing oxidation on aluminum. So when you have steel, when you have a ferrous metal and a non-ferrous metal together, the metals usually interact, create corrosion. In this case, we had steel clamps, steel screws, old steel, and so I'm replacing everything with stainless steel. And the Noalox not only prevents corrosion from starting, but it's also electrically conductive. It's used for a lot of wire connections. They use Noalox between copper wires and what do they call them? They're kind of like a joining connection, or ground. If you're using a ground rod, the attachment for the wires on the ground rod, or aluminum and copper. If you've got old aluminum wiring in your house and you've got to put a copper pigtail on the wire, that's a good place for it. So that's what Noalox is for. So it's electrically conductive. What I do is I took a Dremel with a drum sandpaper disc, or not disc, but the sandpaper drums, and sanded off all the steel corrosion, and then cleaned it up real good. And where I join things together, I put the Noalox and the stainless steel hardware. So that's what we're doing here. We'll get into the beam at some point later. I'll tackle that later. These are just straight radials, so I've only got one interface between tubes. The traps, I've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different tubes I got to connect. So that's what's happening there. Let's go back over here for a minute, and so we'll talk about the trap a little bit here. So I'm going to put this on pause. It'll be a few minutes. So back again. So here's the trap, and you can see why it needs a little work. There's these spacers on both ends. They're up inside the tube right now on this end. You got spacers here, and that keeps the tube, this outer tube, which is actually a capacitor. So it forms a capacitor. So it's a air capacitor over a coil. So when you slide the tube up, it becomes an LC network. It's tuned for the frequency. So as you can see, this is a little messed up. Wires broke. Obviously this didn't work. This antenna was sitting in the ground for a long time, and bugs and water and everything else got into it. So that's why we're going through it. So you can see the hardware here is rusted, and it's got aluminum. This one actually has copper. So the rest of the tubes had aluminum wire. This one has copper. And you can see here, probably through electrolysis between the copper, the aluminum, and the steel, that this has come apart. So anyways, take a brush, clean out the space between the turns. And this is actually, I like this antenna because they use a phenolic material. Phenolic is kind of like a plastic, but it's harder. And they actually turn it like a screw. It's got grooves in it that the wire sits in. And then that keeps the spacing on the wires. But they didn't do a very good job of enameling the wire. The aluminum wire is all bare. So you got to be very careful, because you get shorts between the turns and you have a problem. So what'll happen here is I'll fix the terminal ends. I'll clean out the coil, get this all cleaned up, and once that's done, I've got heat shrink that'll fit over this whole thing, and then I put the silicone grease, this stuff, in this. So my idea here, and I don't know, I've never done this before, so it may work, it may not, or it won't hurt anything. I'm going to layer silicone grease on this coil between the turns, over the top, and then I put the heat shrink over the top and shrink it down. And in theory, what will happen is that the heat shrink will force the wire into the form, and will use the turns in the form to keep it spaced properly. And then the silicone grease is non-conductive, and it doesn't break down like petroleum grease does. And so it will fill in the space between the turns and help keep it spaced and help insulate it. So when I get done, I'll have a nice clean trap, as I've done with these other ones. That's it'll have silicone grease, heat shrink, new connections. There'll be no locks at the screws, prevent corrosion and build up again like this has. And then slide the tube back on and do the same with the screw at this end. I'm going to clean this up with the Dremel tool, and then put stainless steel hardware and no locks on that. So this is probably going to last, I hope, longer than I am. I'm 65 tomorrow. Happy birthday to me. And this should last another 40, 50 years once I get done. And anyways, so like I said, it's a work in progress. I will keep you updated. The Collins is in the house. It's waiting for winter. That's good. I decided I'm gonna finish that up as a winter project. So I'm out here. It's a beautiful day. It's about 80 degrees, slight breeze, clear skies, no rain in sight for a while. So that's a good thing, because I got all my tools outside and I wouldn't want them to get wet. So anyway, I will proceed. I'll see you later for part 2 or part 3 or whatever. W6BDD. I'm clear.